I do, for my allergies. Which are driving me crazy.
Are they bad?
Freeze. They're horrible.
Allergies? What are you allergic to?
Everything.
Pollen, ragweed. Oh, you got it.
Ragweed.
But I forgot Claritin today, so I'm a bit of a
I'm
mess.
not
We should have it in the cupboard at work.
Yeah, we should.
I'll take it.
I'm not an afternoon coffee drinker, but the past few weeks it's like
Yeah.
I've had to every day just to get
Through the day. Yeah,
So,
Yep.
When I was on vacation that weekend, we didn't have any coffee, and the person I was with, we looked at each other and realized we hadn't had coffee in 3 days, and we wanted to kill each other.
Tarek, tell people what
do
they're watching.
Yes.
You are watching On Tap with Wisconsin Veterans Museum Director Michael Telzrow.
There we go.
Telzrow.
Telzrow.
That's right. Fix that. 2 syllables.
It's going to start any second now.
Not low. Telzrow.
Telzrow. Gotcha.
You got audio?
Telephone in row. Telzrow.
I do not.
See, that wasn't broadcast over Facebook, so you're cool.
Oh, we're live right now.
Oh, well, I guess it is.
Well,
I'm glad you asked.
Tarek,
These are fun.
please entertain our audience.
Oh, is that
Do you hear anything,
is that
Jackie?
flip not switched on here?
What's wrong with
You can hear it?
Off on smartphone.
7 people watching.
Okay.
Waiting for more.
I cannot hear for some reason.
I think Kelly got like 7. Wow.
I'll put froze on mine too.
Perfect.
Just leave that up the whole time.
Tarek, ask people if they can hear us.
Yes, ask.
Sound check. Can people on the internet hear us?
Oh, I heard it for just a bare second. There we go. Interwebs. Okay.
Good?
Yes.
All right.
All right.
Start it. Live from Genna's Lounge, it's Wissai on Tap.
Sorry, you got to start
More power.
over. More power.
Henry has more charisma
Come
than
on.
that.
Also
Live.
working for 10 hours.
Come on.
Live from Genna's Lounge, it's Wissai on Tap, Wisconsin, with Wisconsin Veterans Museum Director Michael Telzrow.
Michael, thanks very much for doing this. The motto of your museum, every veteran is his story. Give us a shorthand version of your story. 8 years in the Coast Guard, when? Where were you stationed? Specialist as? Go.
8 years in the Coast Guard, 1980 to 1988. Spent most of my time in Miami, Florida.
Oh.
Spent a year on a cutter out of Galveston, Texas, patrolling the Yucatan, Cuba, Windward Pass. My specialty, I was a yeoman first class petty officer.
Any
like
war
that.
stories?
Yes. We were told not to ever land on any of the. We did a lot of small boat patrols, okay, off the ship, U.S. Coast Guard cutter Valiant. Our instructions were never to pull into an island for any reason. We decided we would have lunch on one of the out islands because it's a lot more fun than trying to eat your lunch.
Breaking the rules. Go ahead. Excuse me.
Well, it's a lot more fun than trying to eat your lunch bobbing around in the Caribbean. So we pulled in and we ate our boxed lunch, and there was some hard fruit-like things laying around on the beach, and we all carried PR-24s, nightsticks, and 45s, and some of the guys were carrying M16s. And I said, "Let's play a little baseball." So we tossed some little things around and using PR-24s as baseball bats, and one of them got loose and struck the ensign in the head and split his eye, and we had to go back to the ship and tell the old man we were playing a little baseball.
Little baseball on an island you weren't supposed to be
We
at.
weren't supposed to be at.
I understand that one thing drives you crazy when people refer to your museum as a war museum. Why does that drive you crazy?
Well, because that's a one-dimensional definition. We really are trying to move in the direction of telling the personal stories of the veterans, and that's why we say every veteran is a story. Whether the veteran is seen combat action or not, there's a story there. There's something there, and that's how people order their lives. We tell stories. We have our own stories, and so that's how we can make the veteran story relevant to people, is if we present it in that way. Yes, there's the backdrop of conflict. Okay, without that, there would be no veterans. But our focus really is the veteran individual story. They're the most compelling stories. Let's face it, war is the worst thing that man can engage in. But by the same token, it's the most dramatic and often brings out not only the worst in humans, but often brings out the best as well. So it's a backdrop of those stories. It's not, we're not there to talk about war as such, but it certainly is part of it.
Now, the museum has got primo real estate on the square. How many go through the museum every year? And do you have an age demographic? In other words, how many students? So give us the overview.
We're doing about a little over 20,000 students annually. Now, they come to Madison primarily to see the Capitol.
Yeah.
They'll visit us, or they'll visit the Historical Museum, our colleagues across the street, or if they have enough time, they'll do all three. So we're doing about 20,000 students. We're approaching 100,000 visitors annually.
Is that up or down in the 7 years you've been there?
It's going up now. We've increased our marketing efforts, which has had great effect. That's the busiest pedestrian corner on the state in
Yes.
Wisconsin. We should be doing 200,000 in my mind. There's a little question of capacity in the building to handle that sort of crowd. But so it has been going up, which really is kind of bucking the trend for history museums nationally. History museum visitation is down, and that's a troubling statistic.
Did
Now-
we talk about moving into or building a new building?
Yeah, what are your goals? You want to take it to 200,000? How do you do that?
Yeah.
Well, ideally, we would need a larger complex.
Give up your primo real estate?
Well, that's the big question. I mean, real estate on the square, premium. So I don't honestly know what the future is in terms of that. We know that we've been there over 20 years, and so at some point, there's our desires to tell a broader story, a newer story about the veterans, based upon what we believe is sort of the typical veteran journey. Civilians.
Is there a typical?
Well, there is. I mean, throughout time, you aren't born a veteran. You're a civilian. You're a member of the public, of the civic world. You become a soldier, a warrior, for some reason. Maybe you need money for school, or maybe it's 1861 and you want to see the Union preserved and slavery abolished. Then you get trained. You become uncivilized. You become trained. You get deployed, you may see combat, and eventually you come back. That's the story we want to tell, and we want to tell it without regard necessarily to a chronological approach. So people can make those connections between these different periods. We think it's a more effective way to do it, and it's a much better way for us to get at those personal stories that we have. We have some incredible stories in our collection that need to be told.
What's your favorite exhibit? If
In the
you're-
current museum?
Any teacher watching this, they should bring their class and be sure to see which exhibit and why.
Well, I think that my favorite exhibit, existing exhibit, is our World War I, our temporary World War I exhibit that we just put up, because it does just what I was talking about. It talks about the individuals who went over to France, a diverse lot of individuals. We have Helen Bulovsky, who was a nurse from Milwaukee, who joined because she knew she was going to be dead in a number of years. She had a health issue that guaranteed an early death, and she wanted to help people. So there's her story. There's a story of John Iserman, who was a Coast Guard guy, joined the Coast Guard before the war. They got transferred to the Navy. He wasn't very happy about that. It's a guy who loved life. He loved dancing. He loved women. He had a great time. A fascinating story. Well, he's got a great story. He comes back to Kenosha at the end of the war, and he's a little restless because he's been all over the Atlantic. He's been to Havana. He's been in New Orleans. He's been in New York. He's just utterly bored with Kenosha. He can't wait to leave. He's got his sights set on New York. He meets a woman named Rose at a church dance. That's the end of the story. Marries her, lives in Kenosha for the rest of his life. So there's these great stories. Mortimer Lawrence, who shot down the last German aircraft in World War I. He's from Beaver Dam. His house is still on I think it's Center Street in Beaver Dam. He wanted to do two things in France. He had an obsession with smoking. He kept writing home to his parents and saying, "Send me Bull Durham. Don't stop until I tell you." The French tobacco is awful. Even when you mix it with the British, it's horrible. And I can't wait to shoot down a German aircraft. He had virtually no chance to shoot down a German aircraft. He was a reconnaissance photographer. Last day of the war, he gets a victory. It's an incredible story.
That's a great story.
There's so many like that.
When I go on the internet, your museum gets strong reviews, and people love it that it's free.
Mm-hmm.
Do you envision a day when you'll have to charge, given the budget realities in the Capitol?
I think that's a reality at some point.
How far out, Mike?
I couldn't predict, but certainly if we were to acquire a new museum, a new building, that would be a certainty.
And you would argue for a new building because why? Number one argument?
Number one argument is these are important stories to tell. A nation's more than just a line on a map. Okay, we do more than just show things. I think we contribute to the civic health of the nation. We have an obligation to acknowledge and to remember what veterans have done. We have a civic obligation to do that, and I think it makes the community stronger if they have an understanding of what veterans have done and what they've gone through. And it also, I think it provides a unifying factor for this country and for this community.
What is the item in your store that sells best?
Probably candy. That's a good question.
That's just Jackie.
We have a lot of kids come in, and they're armed with $5 bills. So dog tags.
Dog tags.
They love dog tags.
How much are dog tags?
I think they're $2 or $3 a pop, something in the neighborhood. Okay. So they're a big seller. We have a lot of different stuff. So it's usually the smaller stuff. Okay. It's not the most profit on those. That would be on our leather bomber jackets and those sorts of things.
The whole debate over the Confederate statues and the plaques, right. As a historian, offer your perspective on that.
I've given that a lot of thought, and I don't have an answer. I have a lot of things that sort of in my head. I think what the biggest problem is that the two most vocal sides that we hear are the least qualified to be talking about it. You have one side who wants to pretend that the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery, which is utterly ridiculous. I have letters and diaries in our collection where Wisconsin soldiers are very clear about why they're going to war and why, and one in particular says this nation will never be free. It will never realize its cherished ideals until slavery is stamped out. So there was no question that was the overriding cause of the war. And the other side, who don't quite have historical perspective, and that's not to say that there isn't some cause for some reflection about these things. Nobody wants. I don't think. I can understand why some people are uncomfortable about many of them. I don't think I'd be very comfortable with the statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest in my park or down the street. It's one thing to remember is that was part of, in many cases, not all of them, that was part of a reconciliation process. If you take the memorial here,
the one in Forest Hill?
Forest Hill. There were two.
One that's so large the mayor said it just cannot easily be moved. Excuse me.
Correct.
You want that in your museum?
Well, we would consider acquisition of the one that had a connection to Wisconsin veterans. There were two Iron Brigade veterans who were involved in establishing that with Mrs. Waterman, Frank Oakley and Hugh Lewis. And Hugh Lewis lost an arm at Gainesville, so these guys knew about war and they knew their enemy, and I think they viewed it as often warriors do when time passes. I mean, we have veterans, close friends of veterans that come to our museum who make trips to Vietnam on a regular basis.
You have oral histories there, don't
we
you?
do. Yeah,
how many?
Absolutely. A little over 2,000.
I remember Senator Bob Jock was talking about going over and recording his oral history.
Yeah.
Excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah.
So they're accessible? You can walk in and do what?
They're accessible. And many of those are accessible online as well. So, but to speak to the memorial thing, I think there needs to be and we always talk about it, we need to have a national discussion when we never do. We just have various groups shouting. There needs to be some serious thought about that and how you proceed with that. And it speaks to the future of history. How are we going to treat history as we move forward? Is it limited to the small, Confederate memorials? Mm-hmm. Is it going to bleed over into something? As far as I'm concerned, founding fathers are off limits. Okay, I mean, you have to look at things in the totality. So the Confederate memorial thing is very complex. I don't think we've worked through it. I think it needs to be looked at very carefully. One thing I would say is I'm utterly against a sort of mob action where the memorials are torn down and destroyed. I think that's uncivilized. I think it's unbecoming of a nation like ours.
You were very proud in May when you got the Civil War flag that was made and presented in July 4, 1860, to members of the Lacrosse Light Guard. You're very proud of that.
We're very proud of that, and we're very pleased that lacrosse had over time had the foresight to preserve.
Here's
that,
my question though: if you could acquire one additional item, what would it be? What's on the historian's list?
That's a great question.
Number one,
I'm just going to. We'd like to have an Iron Brigade frock coat, which is sort of.
Do they exist?
They do.
How do you find them?
Well, I know where one is, and
Shall we take up a collection? How much is it?
Well, I don't know that I feel comfortable saying how much it is, but we're still working on that. I think there's still a chance to acquire that.
Why is that so important?
Because the Iron Brigade, not to lessen the impact of other regiments and brigades that fought from Wisconsin.
Antietam and
They were
Gettysburg.
they were at all the critical battles up through Gettysburg and beyond in the Civil War, and the frock coat and the black hat were sort of just iconic images of the Iron Brigade. We've got the black hat, the only one that in existence that saw action at Gettysburg. So it'd be nice to have the frock coat.
Where's this coat?
This coat is in Appleton.
In Appleton, in a privately.
It's in a private collection.
Are you making overtures? Or should I stop asking?
No, we've been talking for quite a while, and I think we're making some progress.
Well, what strikes me when I look up at the Civil War is 1 in 8 Wisconsin soldiers who went off to the Civil War died either in action or mortally injured. That's pretty high. The total was 3,800 who were killed. So, but we had then in Vietnam 1,160, and we had in Iraq 91, Afghanistan 37, Persian Gulf, Desert Storm 10. How are you honoring, and maybe I should know this, how are you honoring the veterans from Iraq, Afghanistan, Persian Gulf?
Great question. We are in a position where we're very lucky that we can talk to them now. When they're young, they still have sort of vivid memories. Time hasn't affected their memory as much. So we have a lot of interaction with younger veterans, and they're sort of critical to our future as well. The problem with that era is they're not allowed to bring back anything. They're very limited as to what they can bring back. So in terms of collecting, we get their story, we get their oral history, which is absolutely important. But they don't have the luxury or the privilege that their predecessors had. I mean, World War II, you could bring back automatic weapons. You can bring
Ordnance.
back ordnance. You can bring back pretty much anything. Today, there's a tiny little list of what they can bring back. So,
And then people are probably emailing, so you don't really have personal
well, that's
letters.
absolutely. Everything's electronic now. The digital images from Gulf War and some of those early, they're just not as good as continual tone photographs that their grandfathers sent home in World War II. So it's a little more difficult. You think it would be easier, but it's a little tougher today.
Are you planning a major exhibit with Iraq and Afghanistan and Desert Storm veterans?
We did one just before I arrived in 2010. It's called Faces in the Sand. It'll probably be time to revisit that in a couple years, because now that we're further from the event, we a little better perspective about what it meant. We didn't even have an agreement about what to call this war. We call it the War on Terror. I don't know if that'll be the title in 10, 15, 20 years. I'm not sure. And who knows where it's going now.
Let's talk about the Vietnam War. First of all, why is it so important that you have that audio from Vietnam blaring outside the museum with the helicopter? Thwack, 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 thwack. Why is that so important?
Why is that so important? That's gone now. That's gone now.
Oh, okay, but it was there for a long time.
It was there for a long time.
And
I'll tell you where
why
that
was it so
came from. We deinstalled the bronze figures, much to Miss Johnson's chagrin.
Yes, and many other people.
Many other people.
It's quite a controversy.
It was. I wanted to do something dramatic in the window. That window is awful for looking in during the daylight. There's a reflection. You really can't see anything. And it still is. Thank you. And we've tried everything. It just doesn't work. So I want to do something dramatic, and we had this. I came across this audio recording, actual chatter, Huey helicopter.
Oh, it's
chatter.
obvious that it's real.
It's real, and we had to censor much of it. And I thought, well, what could be more dramatic than that? And by and large, we had a pretty good response to it. We had a couple people who raised some concern about it and thought that it was inappropriate.
How long was that audio thwack, thwack, thwack going out there?
Oh gosh, that had to be at least 2 or 3 years.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Are you watching Mr. Burns' series on the Vietnam War?
I haven't. I haven't watched it. I will.
But I bet you'll get there.
I will get there. Yes, but I have not had a chance to do that so far.
Well, what about as a historian? Do the documentaries of Mr. Burns and Miss Novik, do they help the cause of museums like yours?
Oh, absolutely. I think, yes. There's no doubt that anything like that raises awareness. It certainly did for the Civil War. I mean, that really, really made a mark and really helped History Museum. So clearly, it does help us when that's highlighted. So
he's doing quite a service.
I think he's doing a service now.
Do you see a spike in visitors when one of his documentaries is over?
We have. I can't speak to that because this will maybe after this one we'll see some. Certainly, there's a little more interest on our when we post a Vietnam-related something on our Facebook page. There seems to be a little more interest, so it could be.
Okay, let's cast it forward. 5 years from now, what would you like to see changed at the Veterans Museum?
I'd like to see a new museum.
New museum on the square?
Oh, well, that would be wonderful. But anywhere where there's great accessibility for the citizens of this state to come and see us, whether it's on the square or somewhere else, that's okay.
If they weren't on the square, you probably wouldn't get all the kids, the school kids going on tour at the state capitol. I mean, I don't know.
Well, there's that issue. Yeah, there's that issue. But I think that we're out of space. If there's anything beyond Iraq and Afghanistan, I have absolutely nowhere to discuss that and to look at that.
Maybe just having wars.
Well, maybe just stop having war.
Well, we should write somebody and tell them to stop.
Maybe the last question. What do you find satisfying? Why do you love your job? What's a good day as a museum director?
A good day is watching students and watching them engage with our docents, who in many cases are veterans, and seeing that interaction between generations and passing on the legacy of veterans. That's a good day. And the veterans come, and they must linger in front of some of those exhibits, and it must be a very emotional moment for them. In many cases, it is. It is, and that's something where you then you understand the importance of your job when you see something like that.
And what kind of questions did the students ask their docents?
Well, they'll typical student questions, because they don't, especially the young ones, just don't have a body of knowledge about any of it. So you get some cute questions. How graphic can you be? With respect to descriptions, talking about? Yeah, with some of your exhibits. Well, if you look at the Antietam exhibit, there's a dead soldier with a head wound right there. So that's fairly graphic. I think our docents do a good job of keeping it age appropriate, so we don't get into too much of that. Now, if you listen to the oral histories, you're going to get the real story and fairly graphic in many cases. Right. We don't shy away from that stuff, but we do have to be.
Got to be truthful.
Got to be truthful. We got to remember that we have fourth graders in there as well.
Right.
Well, congratulations.
Well, if my dad has a mother, my father was a veteran. He's got a trunk full of stuff. What should he do with it? Donate it to the museum?
Is he a Wisconsin veteran?
Yes.
You should call us.
They're love letters.
Oh.
Do you have a whole section of love letters?
We do. We have some fabulous things like that. Those are the best things. The personal stories, the letters, the diaries, the things they sent home. We have a doll in our collection that was given to an 8th Air Force pilot in England by She was a prostitute, and
Now it's getting juicy.
told if you keep this doll in your airplane, you'll come back safely from every mission. And of course he did. And it obviously had nothing to do with the doll, but there's stories like that, and the love letters are they're very touching. And we have jewelry that was sent home to loved ones. And it's beautiful stuff. So they're human stories. They're the stories that everybody can relate to. In many cases, have nothing to do with combat or the battle, but they reflect human inclinations and desires and everything that we all have.
Can you name an item that you deemed inappropriate and sent back?
Oh, inappropriate for what reason?
You chose not to show it.
No, we don't. I don't think we have anything in our collection that we would. Well, that's not
Too
true.
gory, too personal.
We have some.
Naughty.
We have some lighters from Vietnam that have, things engraved on
Yes.
them that might be
Yes.
inappropriate. So we probably wouldn't show those.
So where are they? In an attic somewhere?
They're in one of our drawers in our collection. We may show those at some point if we can figure out a way to do that in a tasteful, proper way. But generally, there isn't anything that we wouldn't show in the collection.
Great.
Now, photographs, we don't really have anything that's too graphic in terms of loss of life or anything.
Are the veterans getting their due in America?
I think they are. I think they are to some degree. I think that I hesitate to say that they need more due, but I think finally now, particularly if you look at the Vietnam generation, they certainly are, certainly have been, and I think it's much better than it was. Let's put it that way.
Have you been on an honor flight?
I have not. I've had staff members do it,
moving.
and they're incredible. It's a wonderful thing to do. It really is.
What oldest age of a veteran that has visited your museum, and what war were they part of?
We recently had a gentleman who was approaching 100 come into the museum. So we get a few of the World War II veterans of that age come in.
We lose as a nation how many World War II veterans every day?
I've lost
Remember
track.
the
It
number?
was about 1,000 a day a while
1,000
back,
a
so
day.
it's got to be.
Hard to imagine.
Yeah.
And
They're-
what about due to suicides? I mean, there's like 20 a day or something?
Yeah, that's another issue that
Really?
that needs to be addressed, and people are looking at that. But
How do you do that in a museum? Painful.
I'll tell you, we've done some things that I think have helped. A couple years ago, we mounted an exhibit that showed art by those individuals who were suffering from PTSD.
Well, that's
This was incredibly moving. You looked at these images and you read some of the commentary, and it really struck. I mean, we can talk about PTSD all day long, but this was a sort of tangible evidence of what these individuals are going through. So I think, and I know a lot of veterans came through to see that, and I know I can't help but not believe that it helps some of them. It's a wonderful program out of Appleton and Green Bay, and so we've done that. We've also we've hosted veterans who have had issues with PTSD and had them come through the museum. So, and I think the act of talking about it in our oral history program in many ways is therapeutic for
How
some
do you
of
do
them.
those? Do you interview them, or does somebody interview
We
them?
have a staff member, Ellen Brooks, who is she's a bona fide professional oral historian. She went graduate degree from Columbia, really knows her craft and her profession, and so she does most of the interviews. She does have a small core of people who will interview for her, but she's really top notch and knows how to. There's you guys do it for a living, but there's an art to interviewing, obviously.
Yeah.
And
So if people want to give donations, I'm sure
Yeah.
you would accept them. How would they donate to the Wisconsin Veterans
They
Museum?
simply contact us. They can contact our curator of history, Kevin Hampton, if they're donating three-dimensional objects. If they're donating letters and photographs, of your Russell Horton. He's our
What
reference
about
archivist.
Cold cash.
Cold cash, that would they can contact our foundation, our non.
You personally.
Or, don't do that.
Oh, Michael.
Don't call me.
But to go back to Claudia's question,
Yeah.
if there are some memories and other materials in an attic, your museum would like to see them?
Well,
Seriously?
we would. Now, we don't take everything.
Right.
Because we have,
You're running out of space.
well, fortunately, the state in its wisdom has seen fit to build us a new storage facility, a state-of-the-art facility on just off of East Washington. So we'll have more space. But we really try to collect those things that have some good stories behind them or are emblematic of something.
Provenance, isn't that called?
Provenance, right? Yep, we got to have the stories. They can contact us, and we'll take a look and see.
Well, congratulations on.
You are the most dapper man in probably the state, maybe the
I think
you
you're
do have to
exactly.
put your hat on before you
Yeah.
Where is
Picture
that
of the
hat?
shoes.
Where's
Zoom
that
in on
hat?
the shoes.
Come on,
For
you
sure.
are the
Oh,
best
here,
dressed man.
I'll get it.
Sorry, you are.
Okay.
You just
We're
have to
taking
live
a
up.
look at your shoes.
Whoa!
Well,
Oh
you
my
know-
gosh, they are beautiful. And the socks.
There's no secret to dressing well. All you have to do.
What is it?
What
though?
is the secret to dressing well?
What is the secret?
Yes.
Well, first of all, are we going to really talk about this?
Yes,
Yes,
because you are.
This is the point of the show.
All right.
This is the
Dashing.
best part.
First of all, most men
Yes.
buy suits that are one size too big.
One size too big. Okay.
Most men, right off
Maybe
the
their
bat.
Fashion
bodies are
advice.
one. Maybe bodies
Guys
are one
out there,
size
listen
too
to this.
big.
Fashion advice.
Their bodies might be one size too big.
The other thing, and you don't have to buy an expensive suit. You
Okay.
buy off the rack. Find a good tailor, because
good tailor.
the suits off the rack
Okay,
are never.
0.2,
They're
okay.
never going to fit
Oh,
you
wait.
perfectly,
Nice. Okay.
right?
His mom. Or a good mom.
So
your mom's
buy
a
the
tailor.
right size and get it tailored.
Get it tailored. Never buy cheap shoes.
Never, ever
Ever.
buy.
Because you can have the best suit, and then if you look at the shoes and they're
That's what my mother always said.
Whoa!
Check out the shoes of a
didn't-
man.
just a real
See how he
quick
treats
I
add
his
didn't
to
wear
that
my
story.
shoes from Florence. I'm sorry.
I know somebody
Those
who
are-
shops
those are
at
fine.
Goodwill, gets really good hand-me-down suits at
Yes.
Goodwill, and then
Gets
pays
them
a lot of
tailored?
money for a tailor.
Yeah, the shoes are
Smart.
so important.
Put
Well,
the hat on. Because you're so stunning with the hat. Come on.
yeah, it's our way of thanking
Oh.
you. Congratulations on running a nationally known museum.
Thank
Yes.
you.
And thanks for
Thank you.
being a good sport.
Yes.
On tap.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank
you
you.
very
My
much.
pleasure. Thank you so
Enjoyed it.
much.
Loved it.
Best dress was, I guess.
You guys are funny.